All right, 3 stories, 3 moments, 3 decisions that tell you everything about where power actually lives right now in America. And none of them are being told the way they need to be told. Because the version you're getting from the headlines is the surface. What's underneath is what actually matters. So we're going to go beneath the surface today, all the way down. Let's start with Iran. Because what's happening right now between Washington and Tehran is not what the administration wants you to think it is. For months, the posture from the White House has been firm. Maximum pressure, no concessions, no deals unless Iran comes to the table on American terms. That was the public message. Strong, clear, unambiguous. But here's what was happening behind closed doors at the exact same time. Envoys moving through back channels, diplomatic signals sent through intermediaries in Amman. Quiet conversations that nobody was supposed to know about until they were already done. That's the gap between what was being said and what was being done. And that gap just got impossible to ignore because Trump moved. Not loudly, not with a press conference, not with a Truth Social post declaring victory. He moved the way powerful people move when they know they're retreating. Quietly, carefully, with just enough ambiguity built in that nobody can definitively call it what it is. But everyone in that room knows exactly what it is. It's a back down. And the question isn't whether it happened. The question is why. And the answer to that question is the one that should make everyone sit up straight. Here's what the administration actually faced. Military planners had been clear in their assessments. A strike on Iranian nuclear facilities would not be a clean operation. It would not be quick. It would not be contained. Iran has built its program with dispersal in mind, with hardened sites, with redundancy designed specifically to survive an initial attack. Which means any meaningful military action wouldn't be a strike. It would be the beginning of something much longer and much more expensive in every sense of that word. And when those assessments landed on the right desks, the calculus changed. Because there is a version of Donald Trump who genuinely wants to be the president, who avoided a major war. That version is the one that showed up in these negotiations, not the maximalist, not the pressure campaigner, the deal maker, the one who looks at a situation and decides that getting something is better than getting nothing while bleeding. The shift isn't weakness, it's arithmetic. And the arithmetic on Iran stopped adding up the way the hardliners needed it to. But here's what nobody is addressing honestly. The people inside the administration who pushed hardest for confrontation are still there. They haven't changed their position. They haven't publicly broken with the approach. They are watching this diplomatic track with the specific patience of people who believe it will fail and who intend to be ready when it does. That internal tension isn't resolved. It's paused. And paused tensions in foreign policy have a history of unpausing at the worst possible moment. Watch what happens in the next 60 days. Because the deal isn't done, the signals being sent aren't binding, and the distance between a diplomatic opening and an actual agreement is where things have historically collapsed before. Iran remembers 2018. The administration may be betting they've forgotten. They haven't. Now let's talk about Hegseth. Because this is a story that requires you to understand something specific about how religious language functions in political spaces before you can understand why the Pope's response landed the way it did. When Hegseth invoked Jesus in the context of military authority and American force projection, he wasn't making a theological argument. He was making a tribal one. He was signaling to a specific constituency that the Defense Department, under his leadership, understands itself as an instrument of something beyond political authority, something higher, something that by definition doesn't answer to the same critics who question the rest of it. That framing is not new in American political history. But the setting matters, the explicit, unapologetic nature of it matters, and the reaction it produced matters enormously, because the Vatican doesn't typically weigh in on American cabinet officials invoking religious language. The Pope doesn't usually enter that space. That's the design. Separation of those domains is what makes the system function without constant friction between institutional religion and institutional governance. So when that line gets crossed, when a response comes from Rome directed specifically at what is happening in Washington, the signal is significant. It isn't casual. It isn't reflexive. It is a deliberate institutional decision to say out loud that what is being done in the name of faith is not what faith actually requires. The Pope's response was measured in its language. But measured language from that office in that direction isn't measured at all. It's the opposite. It is the most serious kind of statement because it carries the full weight of the institution behind every carefully chosen word. What the Vatican was communicating beneath the diplomatic phrasing was straightforward. You don't get to use the name of Christ as a justification for policy that this institution does not recognize as consistent with the teachings of Christ. You don't get to weaponize theology for military branding without someone in a position of theological authority responding to that. And here we are. Someone did. Hegseth's camp pushed back immediately. The framing from his defenders was predictable. This is anti-Christian bias. This is the globalist establishment trying to silence American faith. This is what they always do when someone actually believes. But here's the thing about that counter-narrative. It doesn't engage with the actual substance of what the Vatican said. It redirects, it reframes, it turns a theological disagreement into a culture war entry point. And culture war entry points are useful for exactly one thing. They keep the base activated. They do nothing to resolve the underlying dispute. And the underlying dispute here is not going away, because it touches something that goes to the core of how this administration understands its own authority. If your policy is grounded in something that transcends political accountability, then political accountability doesn't fully apply to you. That's the logic. And that logic has consequences that extend far beyond any single statement in any single hearing. The Pope understands that, which is exactly why he responded. And now the ballroom. This one is different in texture but identical in structure. Because what happened when access was blocked, when the venue became a pressure point rather than a neutral space, it exposed the same dynamic that runs through all three of these stories. The question of who actually controls the room, not metaphorically, literally. Who decides who gets in? Who decides what can happen inside? Who has the authority to say this space is closed to you and have that decision hold? In this case, the blocking of the ballroom wasn't a procedural footnote. It was a message. And the message was sent by people who understood exactly how much symbolic weight that specific space carries. Because ballrooms in this context aren't just event venues. They are performance stages for a particular kind of power display. Rallies happen there, fundraisers happen there, the ceremonies that reinforce hierarchy and signal dominance and remind everyone in attendance of exactly who is in charge happen there. Block the ballroom and you block the performance. Block the performance and you interrupt the signal. Interrupt the signal and you create exactly the kind of uncertainty that power structures cannot tolerate. The response was immediate and it was loud, because it had to be. When the space itself becomes contested, when the physical stage for authority gets denied, the authority has to respond with force, or it absorbs the hit publicly. There is no quiet resolution to that kind of confrontation. It plays out visibly. It plays out in ways that end up in the record. And the record now shows that someone decided the cost of allowing access was higher than the cost of the confrontation that came with blocking it. That is a significant decision. It doesn't get made casually. It doesn't happen without calculation. And that calculation tells you something about how vulnerable that space actually is to exactly this kind of pressure. But here is where these three stories connect. And this is the part that nobody is putting together in the coverage you're seeing. All three of these moments, Iran, the Pope, the ballroom, they are all fundamentally about the same thing. They are all about what happens when the authority that has been operating without meaningful resistance suddenly encounters resistance. Meaningful, institutional, consequential resistance that can't be dismissed as political opposition or fake news or witch hunting. Iran's nuclear program doesn't care about press releases. The Vatican doesn't care about poll numbers. Venue access doesn't care about executive authority if the people controlling the venue decide it doesn't. These are three separate domains delivering the same message at the same time. And the message is this: the limits are real, they exist, and they are beginning to make themselves known. That doesn't mean the administration loses these fights. Powerful institutions absorb resistance all the time and continue functioning. The back down on Iran may produce a deal that gets declared a victory regardless of what it actually contains. Hegseth may turn the Pope's response into a fundraising moment that strengthens his position internally. The ballroom situation may resolve in ways that restore access and allow the performance to continue. All of those things are possible. But what can't be undone is the fact of the resistance itself. The fact that in each of these arenas, someone or something pushed back, that the response required adjustment, that the posture of invulnerability absorbed a visible cost. That is the story underneath the three stories. And that story is building momentum in a direction that no single news cycle can fully capture. Watch what comes next. Not the resolution of any one of these situations. Watch what comes after the resolution, because that's where the actual trajectory becomes visible. And right now, the trajectory is the most important thing to understand, because it tells you not where we are, it tells you where this is going. And where this is going is more contested, more complicated, and more consequential than anything the current headlines suggest. Stay close, because the next development is already moving. And when it surfaces, you'll want to have seen this first. Here's the final thing I want you to sit with. Power operates on confidence. It operates on the assumption that the room will be cleared, that the name will be accepted, that the back channel will remain quiet. When those assumptions get violated, even partially, even temporarily, the calculation that underlies every subsequent decision shifts. The people making those decisions know it shifted. They may not say so publicly, they rarely do, but the adjustment happens, the recalibration happens. And what you see in the weeks and months that follow is a system that is subtly different from the system that existed before the resistance appeared. Iran, the Vatican, the Ballroom, 3 tests of confidence, 3 moments where the assumption got challenged, none of them decisive on their own. But together they form a pattern that serious observers are watching very carefully. And what that pattern tells them is simple. The pressure is building from directions that weren't expected to push back. And when unexpected pressure sources align, the structure that's absorbing them has to decide how much it can hold before something has to give. We don't know yet what gives. We don't know the timeline, but something always does. And we are watching in real time to find out what it will be.